Agile project management, explained in less than 10 minutes. Let's get into it. In this video, I'll cover what Agile project management is and why it's so important. In one sentence, Agile project management, it's a flexible and iterative approach to delivering a project. It's a really great framework to choose if you're incorporating a lot of changes or if you're in a project that's really early on and there's a lot of feedback that you need to incorporate in order to reach that final end state project. So what does Agile project management mean? Well, if we break down Agile, it basically means being flexible, being able to deal with changes, having the ability to roll with the punches. Again, this video is focused on the really high-level concepts, so we're not going to dive into the rabbit hole on what Kanban boards are, on what sprint backlogs are, etc. But what you should know is the Agile methodology, it focuses on having really structured approaches to dealing with changes, to dealing with iterations, and to collecting feedback so that you can make informed decisions on any changes to your product or project moving forward. Let me give you a practical example. Let's say you're working on the greatest new social media app. It rivals TikTok. You think it's going to be a great hit. And let's say you're super early on. You've just put together your minimum viable product or your MVP. It's the first working model of what you envision this great social media app to be. Well, when you're this early on, let's say you don't have that many users and it's just been going around word of mouth. How do you know if your product and if the overall project will be successful? Well, there's some really important things to think about. Number one, how differentiated your product is in the market. Is it filling a gap or a need that maybe TikTok and other apps are not? And number two, getting feedback from your users. Is this something that folks will actually want to use? Especially if you're this early on, to be successful, your users and your customers' feedback, that's going to be really key. Because of this, what approach would be really beneficial here? Well, the Agile approach would be a really good fit. Because the framework is focused on getting feedback in shorter intervals, it factors in getting feedback from your users, being able to deal with changes, and then rolling forward with those said changes. So what is the Agile methodology and how is it incorporated in project management? So the main components of Agile are iterative development, collaboration, flexibility, some sort of meeting cadence, and some sort of way to manage your teams with tools. When we say iterative development, that means making progress through small changes. In a practical sense, what this can mean is if you're a baker and you have a new chocolate chip recipe that you're rolling out, you don't quite know if you've hit your mark yet. You're not sure if this recipe is what everyone wants. So what you do is you write down the ingredients that you're using, you try to find a baseline. And then you find 5 of your customers who are chocolate chip enthusiasts. You let them try your initial recipe and you get their feedback. You come to realize all 5 of them, they actually prefer a lot more chocolate chips than what you're using. So because of that, you review the changes, you then iterate on your recipe, and then you create a new recipe that incorporates more of these chocolate chips. You roll it out again, your customers come back raving about the chocolate chips. They love them. Now they think the dough is a little bit too thick. In this example, you can see you're constantly iterating, you're making changes to the final product being the cookie. And ultimately, you're incorporating a lot of feedback from your customers, from your users, in order to reach that end state goal, which is delivering a product or a project that your users and folks will be happy with. In a project management framework, what this looks like is you're first putting together a plan. You're putting together a plan for your product. You're then thinking about the design, how you're going to roll it out and what it looks like. You then roll out your product in hopes of getting feedback and learning from it. Once you've rolled it out, you get a lot of really useful information that you take back to your teams to discuss about how you can make things better. You review that feedback and then ultimately come up with a decision on how you're going to change and move forward in that development. So with the chocolate chip recipe example, we followed an iterative development cycle, which can be really helpful when you're dealing with a product that you're testing for the first time, if it's relatively newer, or if you're just unsure about how the public will be receptive to it. It builds in that slack and that flexibility with allowing you to deal with changes. It's really efficient because it's expecting you to deal with changes. So it's factoring in these shorter intervals of time for you to get feedback, review it with your teams, and then decide on how you're going to deal with these changes moving forward. With any project, having collaboration is really critical, especially for the Agile methodology. If you're dealing with a lot of feedback, and if there are a lot of changes that potentially may happen, it's really important that you're not the sole decision maker here. You want to be methodical with how you assess the feedback. These internal feedback sessions are what we call sprints. One of the more popular approaches to the iterative development lifecycle is the usage of what we call sprints. A sprint is basically a defined, typically shortened, window of time dedicated to completing a set of tasks in the hopes of making progress towards your end state goal. In the case of our chocolate chip cookie recipe example, you've rolled out the recipe and you received feedback that you needed more chocolate chips. So what you do is you write that down as one of your tasks. Figure out the optimal number of chocolate chips to put in this cookie. You're holding a meeting with your internal team members. In this case, this can be the baker, this can be your supplier, so on and so forth. Your goal is to find the optimal number of chocolate chips at the end of 2 weeks to be able to roll out the recipe again to your customers in hopes of wowing them. In order to reach that goal, you're meeting with your teams on a regular cadence. In this case, this can mean daily, and testing the different recipes out. And finally, at the end of that 2-week sprint, you've formulated what you think is the best chocolate chip cookie recipe ever. So you roll it out to your customers. You get their feedback, and it's glowing. You've hit the mark. As your customers are biting into those cookies and you're getting their feedback, that's what we call the sprint review. It's where your stakeholders are reviewing the development in the product, they're giving you feedback, and you're collecting it to review with your teams. After receiving your customers' feedback, thankfully it being mostly positive, you then hold a sprint retrospective. And that's effectively a learn lessons meeting where you sit together with your internal team members. You sit together with the baker, with the supplier, and you let them know, here's how our customers felt. You go over what went great. You go over what went wrong, and you review any lessons that you learned so you can make sure the same mistakes don't happen again. You realize that your customers, they're very happy with the chocolate chip quantity, but they're looking for a cookie that's a little bit more crisp, and yours is a bit too thick for them. So then that kicks off another sprint. So for the next 2 weeks, your primary objective is to find the right thickness of a cookie and to really get that dough right. From the cookie example, number 1, you can tell that I'm a huge foodie. And number 2, hopefully you can see the practical implications of what a sprint can mean in real life. This was just one small example. Sprints are commonly used when developing new software technologies or products. So you can imagine you're constantly reaching out to users, getting feedback in the hopes of developing something that folks will use. So what are the differences between Agile and waterfall project management? As we discussed, Agile is primarily focused more on continuous feedback, changes, and then iterating your product to reach that final end state goal. Whereas the waterfall approach is a lot more structured. You have a very linear approach to getting tasks done in order to reach the end state goal. Ultimately, both are really useful tools. It really depends on the context and the type of project that you're dealing with in terms of which one would be better for you. If you don't know what waterfall project management is, I made a quick video explaining everything you need to know about it. I'll link it right here. So Max, why is Agile project management so important to know? Well, as a project manager, the more tools you have in your tool belt, the more successful you'll be. With the Agile methodology, it's another really useful framework, and it provides you with a structure for how to deal with these changes in a very methodical way. When you think about projects, there really is no one size fits all. It's really important to understand what your project entails, what your goals are, what you need to be delivering, who your clients are, who your customers are, and using all these tools and concepts and thinking really critically about what makes the most sense. The best project managers that I know, they're ones who are able to adapt with change. They're ones who have a vision and who come prepared with a framework and a vision for how to deal with the project. The more you know, the more you're able to apply. And the more you apply, the more experience you have. And all that deep, rich experience, it really helps to set you up for success for your next project. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video both helpful and informative. As always, drop a like, comment below if you have any questions, and we'll catch you all in the next video.